Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Course of World History. I am your host, Mr. Samuelson, and today we are looking at the Qing Dynasty in China. We're not quite ready to jump into the Qing Dynasty first, though. We do need to look at how the Manchus, a group that creates this dynasty, gain and hold power. And the story starts with the Ming Dynasty, which we talked about last time. Now, the Ming Dynasty, which was in control. They had seized power in China from the collapsing Yuan dynasty, Mongols, and brought kind of China back to the Chinese. But they go into decline because of internal conflict amongst different groups that are seeking power. And one of the strategies these groups had used were helping promote to the highest position, the emperor, children. People who are too young to rule. And if they are too young to rule, the empire itself is really controlled by their advisors. The advisors who then rule through that child emperor. And if you can be in that position, and if you can hold that position for long enough, you can use your power to actually carve out little areas of control for yourself. And that was happening throughout China as government ministers used their position of power to enrich themselves and to give themselves more power, frequently at the expense of the nation as a whole. Now, the people of China are not too crazy about this. They see this misrule, they're angry about this misrule, and internal rebellions are starting up against these Ming ministers. And these rebellions led to the death of the last Ming emperor in 1644. So he wasn't actually killed by the group that comes in to take charge, and that is the Manchus. He was instead killed in one of these other rebellions. But the Manchus see an opportunity here. Now, who are the Manchus? Well, the Manchus are a group from Manchuria. Manchuria is north of the Great Wall, outside of Ming China at the time, has kind of a mix of ethnic groups that came together to create the Manchus, but we'll simply refer to them going forward as the Manchus, as this mixed group. Now, they are going to seize this opportunity of a weakened China to invade. And when they do, they are able to shatter the last remnants of the Ming forces and put down all the other rebel groups that are trying to seize control of China. And once again, the Manchus will come in and establish a foreign Chinese dynasty. Just like the Yuan had done it, they were Mongols. The Manchus are going to come in and create their foreign Chinese dynasty. They call their dynasty the Qing Dynasty. Now, this Qing Dynasty, these non-Chinese invaders, come in, and the first thing they need to do is stop any rebellion. Get rid of the idea that somebody else could be in charge here. And the way they come to do it is kind of interesting, and it creates this distinctive hairstyle that for a long time people saw as a Chinese hairstyle, but it really wasn't. It was imposed on them. It's the front of the head shaved, while the back of the head is grown long, frequently into a braid. And this is that Manchu hairstyle. And it was seen as a sign of submission. If you wore this hairstyle, it means that you had accepted Manchu authority and their right to rule. Now, not accepting their authority and their right to rule meant that you got executed. So you either publicly declared your acceptance through your hairstyle, or you were executed. And in this way, it was really difficult for anybody to build a rebellion against the Qing dynasty because you couldn't come out and publicly say that you were opposed to them. Now, this, amongst other policies, helped the Manchus to be accepted as legitimate. The other policies were a little bit less barbaric. Let's look at those. The Manchus represented less than 2% of the population of China. So we are talking a very thin ethnic minority in charge of a very large group. So to gain this acceptance, other than through hairstyles, most of the Ming government practices were continued. They continued to govern the country like the Ming dynasty had. They didn't do dramatic changes. Highest government officials were Manchus. The top of the top of the top were Manchu ethnicity. But the Chinese were given many important government jobs, and in fact, most government jobs. More than 80% of all the bureaucratic jobs within China were managed by the Chinese themselves. Now let's talk about the two great emperors of this time. Two of the greatest emperors of this Ming-Qing dynasty period were Qing leaders. One is Kangxi. Kangxi was the greatest of all Ming or Qing emperors and ruled for about 61 years, from 1661 to 1722. And during his reign, he is going to push the borders of China greatly northward and westward, expanding north and west. Now, Kangxi was a patron of the arts and supported scholarship throughout China. So we see a flourishing of Chinese art. We see a lot more institutions of learning, the belief that education is important, and that, of course, strengthens the empire itself. Kangxi also established trade with the expanding Russian Empire. So whereas before we had the Great Wall of China separating China from other powers like Russia, which is now starting to expand, Kangxi is instead seeing this as an opportunity to exchange goods and ideas, and Russia becomes a trading partner of the Chinese. The next reign is Qianlong. Qianlong was the last great emperor of China, and he ruled from 1736 to 1795, 61 years again. Something about great emperors and 61 years in China. Now, under Qianlong, China reached its greatest size. If you direct your attention to the map down here, this is a modern map of China imposed on top of Qing Dynasty China. So the Qing Dynasty was much larger. It included Mongolia, which had been captured. It included Manchuria, this territory up here, which is where the Manchus originated from, as well as expanding a little bit more into Central and Southeast Asia. Now, late in his reign, however, China's booming population created a problem for Qianlong. Population was exploding because they were doing well, but this created a lot of land and economic problems. There wasn't land for everybody, and people increasingly, the landless, became disaffected with the rule and could not find their place in society, became upset, angry, rebellious because of this. Now, the rebellions were suppressed. The Qing did maintain power, but it was expensive. And as they dropped more and more money into the military to suppress these revolts, they had less and less money for expanding culture and education and all the stuff that had begun under the previous ruler. Now, this is a situation that China is heading into when they have their first significant foreign threat since the Manchus had taken over. Just as the Qing dynasty were looking for this new source of wealth, the British arrive. And at first, it seems like this might work out. The Qing dynasty sells to the British the right to trade in Guangzhou, this small little island in southeast China. Okay, so the Chinese, who had been exclusive, they'd not allowed people to trade into their country, except for this little stuff with Russia, but it was mostly China's going to Russia. They're now going to allow the British to get a toehold in China, selling them these rights. And for a time, the British were great with this. They accepted the deal. They sold in this one area. They only had a few months of the year where they were allowed to sell and buy goods. But later on, they will demand that China allow them to trade in other ports as well, to expand their trading rights. China is going to reject this request. They're going to say, no, we still want to make sure that our nation is focused on China first. We don't want too much foreign interference, foreign influence, and so no, you may not trade in other places. We'll get to this later, but that will be the seeds for some serious problems and conflicts between China and Great Britain. The fact that China is not allowing them to trade in more places. But that is all I've got for you today. I hope you learned a thing or two today, and I'll see you next time. Farewell.